Hey, Armin, good to see you.
By the way, who hasn't read Rutger's book, Humankind, Hopeful History, oder Im Grunde gut, it's really a big recommendation. I think it was sold a million times in the meantime, right? And it's, I think, one of the most important books at the moment. Rutger, great that you are here digitally. I don't know, where's the camera? Where do I have to look to? Probably there. You know, when we're talking about steward ownership, we are often confronted with a very negative picture of humankind. And probably a lot of you in the audience know, you know, when you're talking about steward ownership, Verantwortungseigentum, people will say, you know, who will work in these companies? You know, why should you get up? You can't get everything. This kind of picture, this perception of human nature, what is your take on that? So, from your research, your experience, and of course from your book.
There's a really old theory and a really old idea that's deeply embedded in our culture, in our Western culture, which says that our civilization is just a thin veneer. And that below that thin veneer, below that thin layer lies raw human nature. You know, that supposedly deep down we're all just selfish beasts, right? And we're all in it for ourselves. And this idea, this theory comes back again and again in our culture. So you can find it among the ancient Greeks, you can find it among the Orthodox Christian church fathers who talked about the notion of the original sin, you know, that we're all sinners. You can find it among the Enlightenment philosophers who also believe that deep down most people are just selfish. So, for example, look at the United States Constitution or at some of the founding fathers. John Adams once wrote an essay with the title, "All men would be tyrants if they could." But this idea that people are fundamentally selfish, you can also see it in the 19th century, you know, the notion of social Darwinism, for example. And you could argue it is at the heart of our modern capitalist economy. Again, the idea that we people are just selfish. It comes back again and again and again, this idea. And you know what? I think it's fundamentally wrong. The reason I wrote this book, Humankind, is that in the last couple of decades, there's been a huge amount of new findings, you know, in anthropology and archaeology and sociology and psychology that shows that actually people are, well, we're not angels, obviously, but deep down, we're pretty decent and we have evolved to cooperate. And yeah, I think that's a pretty remarkable fact that people should know about.
Thanks. Especially when we're talking about law, as you said, you know, Hobbes and Hume, etc., they always said, well, even if we have 99% altruists or people who are, you know, pretty decent, as you say, well, that doesn't matter because if 1% is bad, laws need to be for the 1%. And so our corporate law also has to be structured in a way that the 1% bad people are actually somehow capped in somehow safe or managed in a way. What would you say about that argument of lawmakers and lawyers?
So we humans, we often become the stories that we tell ourselves. And the same is true for the laws that we write. So laws are not just laws, right? They are self-fulfilling prophecies. And they create the kind of people that they presuppose. So if you assume that people are knaves, right? If you assume that most people deep down are just selfish, then you are going to create the kind of systems that will create these kind of people, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy over and over and over again. And we see this in schools, we see this in the workplace, you know, we see it in the way we do democracy. What we assume in other people is what we get out of them. And this is something that we need to be very, very careful about.
Do you have an example for that? Because this is a pretty strong thesis.
Well, I think it's not very strong, actually. We have, you know, decades of evidence.
You know, if it was true what you say, that laws create the kind of people that, or the kind of behavior they presume, well then we need to rethink our entire legal system to a certain extent, because it's mostly based on, you know, on a certain perception that we want to prevent that somebody is doing the wrong thing. So you need to give us a little bit one example at least to prove your thesis.
Sure. Well, I agree that it's pretty revolutionary what you're doing. And that's why I'm so excited about steward ownership. I mean, it may sound quite boring to some people, like, oh, I don't know, some legalistic changes here and there. But I think it's a pretty massive transformation of how you would organize society, and it could massively impact the behavior of hundreds, thousands, millions of people. But look, you wanted some examples. I mean, we've all seen this in the workplace, right? Imagine you're the CEO of a company and you don't really trust your employees. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to hang cameras everywhere. You're going to make sure there's a strict hierarchical organization, and people are going to be more distrustful. There's one organization in the Netherlands here that I really love. It's called Buurtzorg, and they've done pretty much the opposite of that. So they've kicked out all the managers. They work with self-directed teams of nurses who decide for themselves, how they want to organize their week and their work. And it turns out that, it's a much more cooperative atmosphere, and it's highly effective as well, by the way. So this is they're being voted Employer of the Year pretty much every year, because their healthcare is just better and cheaper than the competitors. So yeah, I think it's not just armchair philosophy that we're talking about here. It has massive and profound implications for really how you organize everything.
Thank you. You heard about steward ownership, and you just mentioned already that you seemingly like it. You heard just, I think, not long ago about it. What were your first thoughts, and what is your thinking about steward ownership now?
I guess one of the things that I like about it the most is the sense of moral ambition that it conveys, right? I think this is what the world today lacks the most. The ambition to make a significant difference in the world. What we have today, I mean, a lot of young people, they're ambitious, but not really morally ambitious, right? They go into consultancy, they work for KPMG or EY or whatever, right? And they work for a couple of decades until they have their burnout, and then they wonder what they should do with the rest of their lives. I think this is one of the greatest tragedies of our time, the extraordinary waste of talent that's going on. So many people who get stuck in, what the anthropologist David Graeber always called the bullshit jobs, right? People who do jobs that don't really add anything of significance to the world. And what I like about steward ownership is that it conveys this sense of moral ambition, right? The purpose of a company is to do good, to contribute something of value to the world. And that's something to think very carefully about in advance, and maybe also to bind yourself a little bit. I think that's particularly valuable for founders. When you're still in your teens, in your 20s, you have this energy, you can think big, and you can make these kind of radical decisions that maybe later, when you're boring and old, you won't make anymore. So that's one of the things I really like about steward ownership. It's this sense of ambition that it conveys.
No, thanks for your plea to do steward ownership very, very early on. So for the startups who are here, who haven't done it yet, maybe one argument. In the meantime, we are talking with German politics, and they have at least promised in their coalition treaty that they want to maybe create a new form for steward ownership. Is there any message from the Netherlands, from the man who did who brought us the idea of a more positive human picture to our politicians in Germany? What would you like to give them?
Well, Armin, my message would be very simple, which is to take this very, very seriously, right? We often work with concepts and legalistic structures that are years, decades, or even centuries old, but we're moving into a pretty fundamental new era, with huge challenges, whether we, think about the cooking of our planet. Today we have 100 million refugees. I can go on for quite a long time, why we need this moral ambition today. So I would just urge politicians to take this very seriously and to look at this movement and how it's growing, because I find it extremely exciting and inspiring.
Thank you so much, Rutger. All the best for your new book. And thanks for your time.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank
you.